Okay, I'm going to go through Cycle 2, Week 3, our science experiment. It's number 9 in your Van Cleves book called See-Through. The materials you'll need are going to be from your tutor bag in your science bin, your Week 3 tutor bag, and it's going to have pencils, little thumbtacks, and cardstock in there. And then you're going to want to grab scissors from your art bin and some black markers. They don't have to be Sharpie, but some black markers. You'll also have your science journals and your script and your scientific method cards. This experiment this week is kind of more of a craft than it is an experiment, and it's just a craft to emphasize why Saturn's rings, how Saturn's rings work, and why we can see through the rings in Saturn to see the planet. So that's going to be the purpose. I start everything out as we're really trying to be scientists, as Renee has said many times, that I go through the scientific method with them again, and I have these cards that Heidi made last year. This year, I think Rachel made a really cute, just a bigger piece of paper with all these that you can sing the scientific method with, but I couldn't find that, so that's what I have. So we sing through the scientific method, and I usually just go through these while we sing it. And then we can also sing through, because this year we are learning a lot about the planets, and we are going to learn the planets this year, but most of the kids know it, so you can sing I bought a Mercury to visit friends on Venus, but how on earth will I ever get to Mars? Jumping Jupiter, Saturn's parties on Saturday, Uranus and Neptune will ride in a space car. So we'll sing those 2 songs just to kind of get our mind thinking about science. Then we'll talk about our question and purpose. It's going to be about the planet Saturn. And we have our picture of Saturn that we're going to point to. And you're just going to talk about what's unique about Saturn. And obviously the most important thing about Saturn is its rings. Read a little bit about the rings of Saturn. And then we're going to talk about our purpose today is to determine how Saturn can be seen through its rings. How we can see through its rings. Our hypothesis, so I'm going to let them know what we're going to do is we're going to be making the rings. And it's really simple. And in your tutor bin, so regarding age appropriate because we only have one craft and it's actually kind of simple, so I would suggest doing as little as possible, which is age appropriate for your class. So I obviously have the oldest class, so I'm going to not really do much, but younger ones you can decide, tutors, if you want how much you want to prep this. The only thing I did do is these were 8 by 10 pieces of paper, and I just cut them in half because they're going to draw. What they're eventually going to get is 4 pieces like this. So they're going to draw 2 lines on the end of each piece of paper. Okay, so if they want to, I don't have rulers, but if they want to use like the side of their science journal or something to make them straight, or if they want to freehand it, that's fine. But when it's 1 piece of paper, you're just going to draw 1, 2, and then 1, 2. And then they're going to cut it with the scissors, and they're going to cut 1-inch, eyeball it, 1-inch strips. So 4 or 6 of them. Let's see, 1, 2, yeah, or I got 5 of them. So 5 strips after they put their black line on it. And then what they're going to have is they're going to have 5 strips like this. And what we're going to do is each student is going to get a thumbtack, and they're going to put it through the middle of their cardstock, okay? And then they're going to spread them out. They're going to spread their oopsies, my little things came out, the thing, and they're going, so they'll have it like this, and they're going to stick it on the end of the pencil. So what they're going to have now is this is what they're just going to make. And then what we're going to do, once they make it, you can kind of have them stop, and then you can start asking some questions, because we are, I kind of like, go through, our question. Look, we talked about Saturn, how does Saturn have their rings, that kind of thing. And then when we're done with that part, we did our research, which I already talked about, which is, week 10 is our our solar system is week 12. Week 10 are our planets, and Newton's first law of motion is week 16. So kind of review that. That's our research of what we already know. Or just, as you go, the kids, if they have ideas about planets and rings, and kind of see where they take you. Then we're going to go to our hypothesis, and we're going to talk about if these represent Saturn's rings, how can we see the planet Saturn when there's rings there? And the idea is that if you have this in nice and tight, that you're going to be able to, oops, my finger's hitting them, but you're going to be able to, see if you can do it, spin it, and you're going to be able to see what you're still going to be able to see, yeah, inside. So you can see the black rings. It makes the rings, and although there's spaces in between here, the reason why they look like they're full, like they're actual full rings, is because of the law of motion of it just keeps spinning. So that's what they're making. They're recreating the rings. So the question is, when we spin this, will we be able to see, what will it look like? Will we be able to see through it? Will it be able to, these are kind of, my tack is kind of slipping a little bit, but just play with it. Will you be able to see through it or not? And the question is, or the answer is, that it looks like the rings are solid lines, but yes, you still can see through it. If you wanted to try it with maybe less and kind of see, you can play around with that with your students. Just keep asking questions and maybe put less in and say, okay, well, now what happens with less rings? What can you still see through it? And that kind of thing. So, which to me, it looks like you can. And I actually think that looks better. So maybe you only want to do 3 instead of 5. So then that's our experiment, is just kind of testing the rings. And then we're going to analyze it. And what we're going to analyze it is kind of why does that happen? You know, why do you guys think that we can still see through them? And then you're going to go to here. And you can see this picture, and the rings in Saturn, although they look solid, actually are tons of little particles in them. And all these particles, but when they're spinning fast enough, they look like solid rings. And so that's why we can see through them, is because they're not solid. They're all these little particles, but when they spin fast enough, we can see through them. So, let's see. So that's kind of all it is. And I think that if you spend the time, when you're done with that, what I usually do with my students, and it depends, is we just kind of start with our science journal, and then here's an example of someone's, we're put the date, and they either draw a picture, you know, just draw a picture, and then what happened today. And so this one this was from our experiment today of what happened. This is a great example of what they can be doing in their science journal. If they have time, right, you know, they can have a scientific method. Maybe your kids have already done that. But what we do is, like, we've only had a few weeks, but the question, she wrote the question, why does the sun look smooshed? And then she's got the question. She didn't put any research on there, but it's fine. Her hypothesis she put on here, why she thinks it is. Then she drew the experiment, and then we ran out of time for the analysis. So, and the conclusion. So have your students, the more they put in here, the more it's going to sink in what they're doing with their experiments and why, versus it just being a craft. And 2, it really helps give them practice for when they're in a challenge A, you know, in challenge B more, and they're doing these. And this is exactly what real scientists do. So that's why I think you will have time for your science journal. So that's kind of what it would look like, is age appropriate. If they're real little, just have them draw a picture of Saturn. And if they are able to write, you know, have them kind of go through the scientific method and put as much in here as they can. And the nice thing with that is some kids who maybe only get to the question part, that's great, they can stop there. But for kids who are done early, then they can keep going all the way to the conclusion. So I would suggest doing as little as possible. Letting, you know, maybe little ones you want to mark, but maybe just cut them in half and then have the kids cut them and stick them onto their tacks, onto their pencils. So I think that is it.